Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we masech the Chagigah daf vav. We are going to begin on the bottom of Hamid Bey, the last line. Ezu katan. What is considered to be a child as far as the obligation of being olariya? Kol she'enu yochel lirchayev al kseifa shel aviv. He's not able to go on his father's shoulders. So Maskav Reb Zera. So he asked the following question as we continue to Baba Manalef. Ad hacha man asya. Until now, who brought this child up? Who brought him all the way up until Yerushalayim, that now we're debating how he's going to get to Har Bayis. His mother didn't take him. So the Gemara says, Amalei Abaya, Ad Hacha, up until Yerushalayim, Dimachayvi Ime B'Simcha. Actually, his mother is obligated in the mitzvah of Simcha. Rashi says, La'alois L'regel Smoich B'Chag Im Bala, to go with her husband and to be happy. Del HaSimcha Nitztabu Nashim. The pasuk says, V'samachta atol vesecha zuishto. So we see that women are mechuyev in simcha. Taisa says that Gabi isha bala mesamcha bebavel bebigdei tzivunin pishtan, that they bought beautiful garments for their wives so that they would be happy on the Yom Tov. So women in general have to go up until that point, and therefore it's possible that this child went with their mother. However, because of that, I seen Ime, so the mother brought him. However, from this point forward, where women are not mechuyev to go actually to see the Har Bayis, so therefore at that point the mothers will stay and the fathers will continue, and that's where the criteria of the child being able to either go on the father's shoulders or to be able to be holding his father's hand to go up the rest of the way. So Heishiv Rebbe Tachas Beis Hillel with every Beis Shammai. So in this Beis Hillel was explained his shita based on Rebbe. Rebbe spoke on behalf of them. According to Beis Shammai, the pasuk says V'chana lo also that Chana did not go to Shiloh. Ki Amra, she said Leisha, she said to Elkanah, to her husband, Ad Yimel Hanar b'Habi Yosef. I want to wait until my son is stronger, and then I'll bring him. So what does it mean, ad higomel, until he gets weaned? So typically it's l'soif chavdal chaydish. Rashi says after 24 months. Shechein tinik yoinik, that's how long a child typically nurses for. Now we know, it says Rashi says, Meshan Rishayna, at that moment, when a child's already a year old, who yachal yirchalak seifo, if he actually could go on his father's shoulders, Kedil Els Mishalayim Lahar Bayis, the Koshkin Mishilo Mishkan. That's not such a far distance just to get to Shiloh. So on this, the Gemara asks, it doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't Shmuel go? He would be able to simply ride on his father's shoulders. I can also ask you a similar question, you Abaye. That Chanigufa Milu Machayvi B'Simcha, as we just said before, women are mechuyev in the midst of Simcha, so she should go to Yerushalayim, at least, and then you'd have to go to Shiloh, where the Mishkan was. Elchana Mifankusa Yeserta Chazia B'Shmuel. She saw that Shmuel had an extra amount of finickiness. In other words, he was quite weak, and she was afraid. She didn't want him to go on the road because it's possible that he could get sick and possibly die. And therefore she decided, even though she's really mechuyev to go herself for Simcha, but she didn't want to go because if she would go, she'd have to bring her son and he can get sick. So she ended up staying because she had to stay because she was nursing him. Fine. But maybe when it comes to another child, a healthy child, should actually have gone. Boy Reb Shimon, Katan Chigir L'Divri Beis Shammai, L'Sim L'Divri Shnehem Mahu. So when you have a child who, in general, the mitzvah of him going is just al chinuch, which is din rabbanan, and the child's also a chiger. He's physically incapable of walking, in which we say that individual is pater. Now, according to the Beis Shammai, he says that the whole criteria is let's actually look in Rashi. The il chiger l'divri Beis Hillel lo meboilan. We didn't ask a question Beis Hillel. D'lo mechanchinan le. Why? The ha amrinan in mechanachan el katan shiachal echos al alos meragam Yerushalayim. You have to have a child who can physically hold his father's hand and walk. Zeh inu yochel. This child can't do it. So according to Beis Hillel, it's not even a shaila. El avol Beis Shammai, says Rashi, mechayv l'chanachal b'shiachal l'yirchav katan So you have a child, he can go on the father's shoulders, he doesn't have to even know how to walk. Or even if he's not capable of walking, that should be okay. So a person who is blind could still hold his father's hand. Is there a mitzvah of chinuch in this situation? That even though when they're an adult, a chiger or a summa, we already established is potter between olaria, but maybe a katan, because it could be done to get there with the assistance of the father, so maybe we're mechuyev midrabanan. So on this, the Gemara says, Hechidami. If you have someone who is never going to get better, they're unfortunately crippled, they're not able to walk ever, they're not going to be able to see, they remain blind. So Hashan now. Gadol potter, so katan boy. When it comes to a gadol, he doesn't have to do the mitzvahs. So certainly a katan in that status is not going to be mechuyev either. So that's not a shayla that he would be potter. Let's say he's a chiger now, but eventually he will get healthy, or eventually he will be able to see. So what's the din? Because eventually he won't be a chiger, eventually he won't be a summa, so maybe we should be mechanech him so that when he becomes an adult and he's not a chiger or a summa, he'll be able to do the mitzvahs. So Rabbi, kol heicha de gadol mechayev midaraisa katanami mechanchin midrabanan. Anytime that midaraisa, we have a situation where you must do it, so the midrabanan were mechanechem. Kol heicha de gadol pater midaraisa midrabanan katan nami potter. So therefore, if a person is mechuy b'davar as a gadol, so then we're going to mechayim him to do it as a katan. But if you have someone who at this current status is a chiger and a summa as a gadol, he would not be mechuyev. This is the Poshup Shah to read this. So therefore, because of that, we say that he's not going to be mechuyev. Now, Taisa says over here, when it's a chiger sheachlas pashi, it means mikmei gedulai. It means before he becomes a bar mitzvah. Mi amrinan de kivan de gadol hamechuyev b'deraisa gabi katan nami mechay v'chinuch. Maybe we should say that since when he becomes an adult, he'll be healthy, so we should have him, even though he's a chiger now, as a katan to milchanachim. The midi hu taima b'katan mishum milchancho. The other kashu gadol, so this way he'll know what to do as an adult. Because a gadol at this time, as a chiger, a summa, even though he eventually will be healed, so eventually he's healed, he'll be chayiv. But right now he's potter. Okay. Weiter. Beishami omer mariya shtei kesef. We have machlokas beisham beis hillel. Are you going to spend more money on the olos re'iyah or more money on the shalma chagigah? So Tanabon, Beishami omer mariya shtei kesef. Why do you spend more money on the olos re'iyah? The chagigah mo kesef. Shere'iyah oil kul gvo. Because when it comes to a carbon ola, it's completely burnt on the mizbeach, so it's more chashiv, and therefore you should spend more money on it. Mashin kin b'chagigah, with shalma chagigah is something which is not completely brought up to the mizbeach, only some of its sacrificial parts. So therefore, because of that, the din is that you spend less money for the shalma chagigah. Va'od, furthermore, another reason, Matzinu batzeres. We find when it comes to Shavuos, as Rashi says, in Parshas Shor Kesev, the pasuk says, "V'kravtem al alechem shivas kvasim timimim." You have 7 kvasim. You par ben bakar. You have a par echad. You have elim shnaim. You have 2 aisles. They all should be oil Hashem. And then it says that you have shnei kvasim b'nei shana l'sevach shlamim. Only 2 kvasim as a shlamim. So we see that as back in the Gemara, sheriba behen hakasav b'oil yisoyis b'shlamim. We spend more animals, we use more animals on Shavuos as an ola than a shlamim. So therefore it makes sense we should spend more money on olas than shlamim. No, the other way around. Hariyah makasav chagigah shtei kasav. We should spend more money on the chagigah. First of all, shechagigah yishlifni adibor. When it came to the carbon shalmi chagigah, it was done even before Har Sinai. The olos re'iyah only took place after Har Sinai. Where do we find that the Shalma Chagigah was brought before? So Rashi says, "Kodemat and Torah hikribu shlama b'sined." The pasuk says, "V'yishlach as nari b'nei Yisrael." The Yavachad of Hai Kroksiv b've'el hamishpatim la'achar aser sedibros kodem aser sedibros havi bin mukta mocha b'Torah. So the truth is that this pasuk that Rashi quotes is actually Parshas Mishpatim, which is after Parshas Yisro, which talks about the aser sedibros and Har Sinai. But nonetheless, the Torah is not written in chronological order, and that pasuk actually is supposed to be written before Har Sinai, and that teaches us that when it came to Shalma Chagigah, we did bring karbanos before Har Sinai, but we didn't bring olos before. V'od metzinu, Furthermore, we also find b'nesim. When it comes to the nesim, says Rashi, b'chanukas hamizbeach, when we inaugurated the mizbeach, tekrivu shlomim yersim oilos. They brought more shlomim. Dechsiv kol haboiker oila, the whole bakar zevach shlomim. So we actually only brought 3 olos, but 14 carbonate shlomim. So because when it came to the Nisim, so therefore also we're going to bring spend more money on the Shalmei Chagigah than the Ola. Beis Hillel, my time will Amri Beis Shammai. So why doesn't Beis Hillel say like Beis Shammai? Beis Shammai makes sense. You should spend more money on the Ola. So the Kamrid Re'iyah Difa, the first reason you said that the Re'iyah is better, the Oila Kul Gvaya, because it's completely part on the Zbeach, Adarabba, you should think the opposite. Chagigah Difa the Isbesh Deachilos, because after all, it's not just given over to the Mizbech, but it's also given over to people. People can also eat the Shlomim, and they do. And therefore, because of that, because there's 2 achilos, it makes sense you should spend more money than something which is just for one. With the Ka'amrid, nail of Matzeres, so maybe you should learn that from Shavuos, that we see by Shavuos that there's more olos and shlomim. No. Done in carbon yachid, me carbon yachid. And done in carbon yachid, me carbon sibor. It makes more sense to learn that from the Nesim. That's a carbon yachid. And this is also a carbon yachid that's brought on the regalim. And that makes more sense to learn from the Nesim, which are individuals who brought these carbonos, than Atzeres, which is talking about the carbonos sibor. Who Beis Shammai, my time will Beis Hillel. So why doesn't he hold like Beis Hillel? Beis Hillel says that you should spend more money on the Shalma Chagigah. Dik Amrit, that's what they said. Chagigah Di for the Yishna Lifnei Dibor that happened before Har Sinai. So Re'iyah Nami Yishna Lifnei Dibor. According to Beis Shammai, he felt the Ols Re'iyah was also brought before Har Sinai, not just the Shalmei Chagigah. Udika Amrit Nelv Menasiyim. So you said, oh, why not from the Siyim? No, done in davar hanaygo daris, medavar hanaygo daris. Then done davar hanaygo daris, medavar shein hanaygo daris. So when it came to Nisim, that was something which just happened once. It was a one-time deal. The Chanukas Mizbeach. So you can't learn. It's better to learn out from Atzeres, which happens all the time, happens every year. Taisa says, "V'lo boil meimer done in yomtiv miyomtiv afukin Nisim." Right? The chol havi the lumatzinu le hai chiluka b'shum makom. Right? It's an interesting other connection, but for some reason we didn't make that connection. He says we don't ever see that. But again, when it comes to Atzeres, it makes more sense because that's something which is all the time. And also when it comes to bringing these karbanos, it happens all the time. The Beis Hillel my Shna Chagiga Dishlef Nea Dibor. How do Beis Hillel know that the Shalmei Chagiga was brought before? So we saw in Rashi, except that they brought Zvachim Shlamim. Re'iyah Nami, if you look in the Torah or, it's the exact same parak in Shmos Chavdal and Mishpatim. Haksiv, it says the Yalu Oilos. It says that they also brought Olos. So it's also Lifnei Dibur like Beis Shammai. Now Ksav Beis Hillel Oila Shehikri Yisrael b'Midbar. When it says that they brought an Ola in the Midbar, Olas Tamid Havoy. That's actually referring to the Tamid offering, the Tamid Shal Shachar, the Tamid Shal Ben Arbayim. It's not referring to the Olas Re'iyah. It's just talking about the Ola offering, which is the Olas Tamid, Hasuya Bahar Sinai. Okay. Ubeis Shammai Sabri Oila Shehikri Yisrael b'Midbar Olas Re'iyah Havoy. Beis Shammai says no, it's an Olas Re'iyah. Therefore, there's not really something special about the Shalma Chagiga that was brought Lifnei and Dibor. It's true, but so is the Olas Re'iyah. So Omer Abaye, Beis Shammai, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shmuel, Kuhus who they all hold that an Oila Shekri Yisrael b'Midbar Olas Re'iyah Havoy. They all hold that it was actually the Olas Re'iyah that was brought before. So we already saw one. Ubeis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yosei, Kuhus who Oil Shekri Yisrael b'Midbar was actually Olas Tamid Havoy. It was only the Olas Tamid, but the Olas Re'iyah was not brought until afterwards. So Beis Shammai had the Amran, as we said, Beis Shammai holds that it was the Olas Re'iyah. Rabbi Shmuel, how do we see that he agrees to that? The sign Rabbi Shmuel Omer Klolos Nemru b'Sinai. There were general rules that were stated at Sinai. As we continue to Vav Amud Beis. Upratais b'ol moyed. And then more specific details were said, as Rashi says, Mishahukam HaMishkan, at the time in which the Mishkan was already set up. Skipping a line of Rashi, V'yikrel Moshe v'daber Hashem Elav b'ol moed leimor, v'sefer Taris Kohanim, dahainu v'yikra nisparshu kol hilches carbon v'chein devarim harbe. Okay, Rabbi Akiva. So that's what it says. Now, and this therefore is referring to the oilas re'iyah. Rabbi Akiva oimer klolo supratos neber b'Sinai nishnu b'oil moyed. So all the klolos and pratos are said by Har Sinai, and they're repeated by the oil moyed. And the shtalshnu b'arvas moyev. And then it was repeated again by Arvas Moab, says Rashi. Mipi Moshe Yisrael. Moshe said it. Shnemer be'ever hayardin be'eretz Moab hoyel Moshe be'er es haTorah. Which is the very beginning of Sefer Devarim says that. If you want to actually tell me it was an olos tamid, mi'ikamidi di mi'ikara loy boy hefshem v'netuach l'soif boy hefshem v'netuach. That originally it required hefshem v'netuach, the skinning and the splitting, and now all of a sudden it requires it. So this is by an oilos tamid. Hefshem v'netuach is only mentioned in Vayikra. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, this halacha was only introduced in Vayikra. So in in the midbar, the carbon was obviously a olas re'iyah. It couldn't have been the olas tamid, because the olas tamid, it tells you it requires hefshem netuach, which is a requirement, which by the olas tamid. Now olas re'iyah does not require hefshem netuach, but by the Talmud, Hashem instructs this is how it's supposed to be done. How it's supposed to be done. So again, by the oilos tamid, it specifically says that it requires hefshem netuach. So if in fact it's talking about the carbon tamid, so how is it possible that that switched? That there was no requirement of hefshem netuach, then it became a requirement of hefshem netuach? No. L'chayra, it must be there was always a chiyuv of hefshem netuach, which was later on. But what happened with Lifnei Hadibor was actually the oilas re'iyah, and that was something which is Lifnei Hadibor. Rebbe Lezer desanya oilas tamid hu asui b'Har Sinai, the oilas tamid which was offered at Har Sinai. Rebbe Lezer oimer maseha nemer b'Sinai. Its procedure was explained at Sinai. However, he atzmul kriva carbon, we didn't actually bring the carbon. Therefore, again, the olas tamid was not brought before. Only the olas re'iyah was brought before. Rabbi Kiva oimer, no, karva, that the olas tamid was brought before. The shuv v'lo, and from then on, it never stopped being brought. El amayni mekayim hazvachim u'mincha higashtim liba midbar, or boim shana, that the zvachim and the mincha offering, he held back from me in the midbar for 40 years, the base Yisrael. So we're answering shivta shalevi shaloi of the vodazara hein hikrivu osa. Even though it's true, some people didn't bring the carbon. However, when it came to Shevet Levi that never worshipped idols, they continued being mocked of the karbanos. Now, Beis Hillel, Beis Hillel said that the olos re'iyah was not brought before. Only the Shalmi Chagigah was brought, Lifnei Hadibor, and also the olos tamid. Rabbi Akiva hanami de Amran. We also mentioned Rabbi Akiva's shita, as we just said above. Fine. However, there are 3 mitzvahs in which the Klal Yisrael were commanded to when they went up to the Shalosh Regalim: Re'iyah, the Olos Re'iyah, the Chagigah, the Simcha. Yesh b'Re'iyah shen b'shtein, yesh b'Chagigah shen b'shtein, yesh b'Simcha shen b'shtein. Each of these karbanos has something unique that the other two do not have. So let's explain. Yesh b'Re'iyah shen b'shtein, she'Re'iyah oil koil kula gavoa, ma she'en ken b'shtein. When it comes to the olas re'iyah, we know an ola is completely consumed, completely brought on the mizbech. Mashein ken shlamim, not the shalmi chagigah, not the shalmi simcha. So that's one difference. Yesh b'chagigah mashein b'shtehen. When it came to the chagigah, the shalmi chagigah, shechagigah yishlef ne'adibur mashein ken b'shtehen. Now this is actually a proof. The fact that he says only the Shalmi Chagigah was Lifnei Hadibor was before Har Sinai obviously means that they held that the olas re'iyah was not Lifnei Hadibor, and therefore what was Lifnei Hadibor must have been the olas tamid. And then Yesh b'Simcha mashein b'shtein, shasimcha nohegas b'nashim v'nashim mashein b'shtein. So as we established already, that women are also mechuyim in the mitzvah of simcha. Rabbi Shmuel, my taima kamukmas le kibei shamai. So why is Rabbi Shmuel establish himself like the Shita Beis Shammai that it was actually an Olos Re'iyah that was brought. Because there was actually the Talmud. He said it doesn't make sense. How would they have changed the rules? So he said it was an Olos Talmud. So again, it's a question. How does that make sense? Actually, before they did not require hefshin netuach, the skinning and the cutting into pieces. He actually says that it was actually removed, right? It was this din did not apply. So the answer is Sami Mikan Rabbi Shmuel. So in fact, you're right. You should remove Rabbi Shmuel from this list. When we said Rabbi Beis Shammai, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Shmuel, it's really not a raya because it's possible that fine, maybe really it was the Olas Talmud that was brought, and again they were not mechuyev to have to do the hefshem netuach. That's how the Gemara says it over here again. That again lo soif by hefshem netuach. So again, so the rules changed. That shouldn't be a reason to say it can't be that it was the Olos Talmud. That's why you remove Rabbi Shmuel from that list. Hi Kra Hechik Siv. This pasuk, how do you exactly interpret it? How do you read it? The pasuk says Vayishlach Asnari Bnei Israel, and it says Vayalu Oilos. They brought olos, kvasim, lambs, v'yizbechu zvachim shlomim l'Hashem parim. It says they brought zvachim shlomim, they brought oxen. Is that how you read it? O dilma idi parim havi. Maybe both of them were actually parim. Right? How do we understand how to be able to read this pasuk exactly? By the ola, it doesn't say really what it was, so it's not so clear. Was it the shlomim Hashem was parim, or maybe idi parim? That wasn't just the shlomim, it was also the ola. So l'may nafkamina, what's the difference? Which animal the ola was? I mean, now we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, so we have a couple answers. Mar zutra oimer l'hifsek tamim. One has to do with hifsek tamim, where you put the nachnas. Is Rashi kamoshin kar oisa o bezak kef katon. Do you read it as a at nachta, the wishbone, or is it zakev katon? So the way that you would put the emphasis will tell you how to read the word, read the pasuk. Rav Achabar Beredu Rav Omer is more than just how do you read the psukim. It's lay more to tell you the following chiddush. Well, Omer, if a person says Harili Oyla, I am going to bring an ola, and then he says Ke'ola Shikrivu Yisrael b'midbar. So what was brought as an ola in the midbar? Was it parim havi or kvasim havi? Teku. On this we leave with a question. Okay, let's see a couple questions ourselves. Question 1. My time at Beis Hillel. What was the reason of Beis Hillel that says, this is on Vav Mud Aleph, Adifa Chagigah Maria shehi shtei kesef v'hi mo. So Beis Hillel said, first of all, when it comes to the Chagigah, it makes sense because it's shtei achilos, and also because it's lifnei hadibor, as well as it was the Nisim. When you look at the Nisim, there were more shlomim, 14 karbanos shlomim, and only 3 olos. Question 2. Ma yesh b're'iyah she'en b'chagiga, ma yesh b'chagiga she'en b're'iyah. This is on Amud Beis, we just saw. So when it comes to the re'iyah, we know that's kolil. That's something which is completely burned on the mizbeach. When it comes to chagiga, according to this pshat, that's unique, is only the shalmei chagiga was lifnei hadibor, but not the olas re'iyah, which again is not like what Beis Shammai holds. Fine. TA 24. Ma nafkamina, which we just did. What is the difference? Based on the pasuk of Yishlach v'chulu v'yalu oilos v'yizbechu zvachim oparim, was it what exactly was brought? The Sefer Kohen Nami Oilos. What was brought as an ola? Was it a par, or was it a keves? Right? Was it a lamb, or was it an ox? So what's the nafkamin over there? So again, as we said, the nafkamin is either how you would read the psukim. Is it an anachna or is it a zakev katon? Because it's zakev katon will be a continuation as opposed to anachna, it's a stop, like a break, almost like a comma in the middle of the sentence. Or if a person says, I'm going to bring the exact carbon ola just like was done then, so then you have to know what is he obligated to bring, a par or a keves, and that is a teku. TB 25. So same place on Vavam and Beis. What is unique by a Chagigah? So simcha is naig by noshim va'anoshim, by men and women, as opposed to the other karbanos, the olas re'iyah and the shalma Chagigah. Women are not mechuyev; they're only mechuyev in simcha. Adkan.